Good morning, committee. Okay. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'll call this live meeting of Heritage Oakville to order. It's nice to see everybody in person again today. As usual, we have some technical assistance because there may actually be some folks watching the live stream of this at home. And if they're not, they can watch it later on the town YouTube channel. And so we thank the technical folks who are doing all this for us today. We do have some delegations. There are 2 registered delegations today, and as usual, their entry and exit will be managed by the technical people. The agenda and materials were available on oakville.ca, so for anybody who is watching at home and they don't have the agenda, they can get it by going to that website connection. We have 3 discussion items on the agenda today, and I'll just remind everybody that we are an advisory committee and that any recommendations that we make will go to the Planning and Development Council at its meeting on Monday the 8th of August at 6:30 p.m. And just to remind anyone who wishes to delegate at that meeting that they should let the clerk's office know by noon the previous day. Since that's a Monday, that would probably be noon on the Friday before. Okay, Madam Secretary, are there any regrets for today's meeting?
Regrets are received from Sue Hobson and Brenda Sweeney.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest with respect to any items before the committee today? Right, seeing none. The next order of business is the confirmation of the minutes of our last meeting, minutes for June the 28th, and these were circulated. Are there any comments on the minutes as circulated? Somebody like to give me a motion to, thank you, Councillor Duddick, a motion to approve the minutes. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried and the minutes are approved. So, down to business. The first discussion item on the agenda is item 4.1, which is a heritage permit application for a side addition for an elevator on that property. Now, I should just say that along with the agenda material, there were some other items that were circulated to you, and these were letters that were circulated by neighbours and other members of the community giving us comments and input, and that also applies, I think, to the 23 George Street submission. There was some input for that too. So I know that all the committee members will have read those letters and that you will take these comments into account as you consider yourself how to dispose of this application. So, okay, Sue, it's up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll just wait 1 second for the presentation to arrive.
4.1?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, everyone. I'm going to take you through the heritage permit application for 262 King Street. Some of you may be familiar with this property. We have seen it come up several times in the past decade or so. This is the coach house for the former Marlett estate. That estate house is located at 43 Dunn Street, so it's kind of across the road. The coach house was constructed around 1888 and was converted into a residence in the 1940s. There were significant renovations approved to the coach house in 2010, and then again in 2017, 2018, the rear half of the lot was severed off to create a new lot, and there is now a residence located behind this building as well. So just to make sure you're familiar with the location, you can see there 262 King Street is the shaded square, and it's spacing within the block there. You can see the flag lot that has the new lot created behind it. And this, of course, is part of the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. So the application that's before you today is for the construction of a new two-story side addition, and this addition is to accommodate an elevator shaft to provide disabled access to the second story of the house. I'm just going to take you through a few photos of the property and the siting for the proposed location. So here you can see, I believe this was taken around November, December of last year. You can see the house. This is just taken at an angle on King Street, looking towards the front of the house. And then this is looking straight down that side yard where the proposed addition is to be located. And that addition is to be located here, which is behind the chimney stack. So it will be set back from the front elevation. And will also be lower than the overall roof line of the house as well. And so here we've got a site plan of the proposal. The red square is being added by staff just to highlight that little area where the proposed addition is to be located. It is approximately 6 feet by 6 feet. It is a relatively small addition and will only contain the elevator shaft. There's no additional living space proposed. And so on the drawings here, again, just highlighted in the red rectangle is the proposed addition itself. It protrudes slightly from the east elevation of the house, but cladding is proposed to be stucco and the false half timbering to match the existing coach house building with a cedar shake roof. And so this is looking directly onto that east elevation. Well, sometimes we like additions to buildings to have a distinctive appearance so that you can tell at what point they were added to the building. In this case, because it is such a small addition, it was felt that a seamless transition would be more complementary to the structure to make it appear as though it blends with the house more. This is the rear elevation, and so, sorry, there's no red box on this slide, but you can see the addition just at the side of your screen there. And coming around to the west elevation, the addition isn't visible at all. As I mentioned, it is lower than the roof line of the existing house. So in addition to the elevation photos of the house that I showed you earlier, I did include some Google Street View images. These are included in the application package, and they're taken from, I believe, 2018 and 2020. Those were the Google dates. And that's just to show you some of the existing conditions on the street, both during the fall and spring seasons, so that you can see what it's like with leaves down on the deciduous trees, but also with leaves on. And you can see here, this is between, I believe, 260 and 262 King Street, looking kind of dead ahead. The addition really is not going to be visible from the street. And this is looking eastwards along King Street. This is a photo from 2018 because it's before the rear lot was severed off. But you can see the kind of vegetation line of the street that is indicated as being of importance in the block analysis, which I'll talk about in just a second. But it's important to note that the addition will not be visible from this vantage point either. And so included in, I believe, Appendix C to the application is the block analysis from the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District Plan. That analysis is in its entirety for Block 13 in the package, and I've just included an image here to show you where the addition falls in the relative streetscape. So again, the red box and also the blue square are my additions to the block analysis, and that's just to show you relative to the other properties in the district and the character where the addition will be located. As noted in the staff report, there was a minor variance required for this project. It was a reduction of the interior side yard setback to 1.65 meters, whereas the zoning bylaw requires a minimum of 2.4 meters. This was approved by the Committee of Adjustment at their meeting of July 19th, 2022. In the staff evaluation, we've looked obviously at the requirements included from the Old Oakville Heritage Conservation District Plan. And in general, staff find that the addition, with its location at the side of the building, back from the front plane of the elevation, and with it being lower in height and with traditional design materials, we find that it does not have a significant impact on the character of the Heritage Conservation District or of the historic house itself. And in regards to the Block 13 analysis, the proposed addition does not impact the identified view lines that are of significance, and it maintains the intimate character of the streetscape at this end of the block and the vegetation. And so therefore, the staff recommendation is for approval, subject to the final details on the cladding materials come to staff before their installation, and that this heritage permit expire 2 years from the date of final approval. But before I turn it back to Mr. Chair, I did want to address some of the concerns that have been raised in some of the letters from residents. Some of them have been addressed already in the staff report regarding spacing between houses. Staff are satisfied that there will not be a significant negative impact on the character of the streetscape. But also in regards to the documents that have been submitted as part of the heritage permit application. The question of whether or not the appropriate drawings have been submitted has been raised, and staff would just like to note that it has never been a requirement for heritage permit drawings to have stamped or certified architectural elevation drawings for this submission. And that's because that's required as part of the building permit process. Heritage planning staff, well, we are amazing people, are not architectural plans examiners or architects. And so we rely on the wonderful town staff in our building services department to determine the buildability of things through the building permit process as set out by the Ontario Building Code. And so I would also like to note that staff, heritage planning staff, do also review building permits before they get their final sign-off and approval and issued to the property owner to ensure that what has been approved in the heritage permit actually matches what is being approved in the building permit. And that's the way that we make sure what's being proposed can actually be built and is being built according to the approval given by council for the heritage permit. If we note that the heritage permit approval drawings don't match, that there are significant differences, they would be required to come back to the Heritage Committee and Council for additional approval. If there are very minor changes, those can be considered by staff through the minor heritage permit process, but it really is a process that is designed to ensure that any changes made to a proposal between the submission of heritage permit documents and building permit documents are caught because we do have many staff looking at these drawings before they do get approved. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
Could you comment on that? Because I know it doesn't need site alteration because it's too small for that, but presumably at some stage or other through the building permit and your involvement, you'll look at that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, that would be part of the building permit process to look at issues regarding the drainage between two buildings.
Good, thank you. Thank you. So, any questions of Sue? Yes, Kel.
Can you just wait till you're, nope. There we go.
There we go.
Great.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Sue. I have two questions. Did 260 King ever comment, because they have at least one small window facing onto that elevation? And two, I don't see how the heck you can get an elevator shaft in there with entry into the house on the second floor without altering the roof line. And there's no discussion here about altering the roof line.
Okay, so sorry, your first question was about the neighbors at 260 King Street. I believe there has been a submission made on their behalf in the package, and staff certainly were made aware of some concerns from them that have been, I think, addressed in the staff report. But in regards to windows, the existing what I would say is that 262 actually, King will actually be removing a set of windows in order to construct their elevator shaft. And so, and there's no windows in the elevator shaft itself. And so there won't be any issues of overlook. And as for the existing conditions at 260 King, I don't believe that the window itself was raised as a concern, but it is looking into another person's private property. And so it isn't really, while we still want people to have the full enjoyment of their homes, it's not really a consideration of the Heritage Conservation District itself. And then for your second question about how the elevator actually fits, it comes in under the total height of the overall roof, but there will be a new roof line just added. I think, I'll just see if I can direct you to the agenda page. If you can see on page, sorry, I don't seem to have numbers on my hard copy version. Looking at the east elevation with the red box, on the drawing that's labeled A101, sorry, Madam Clerk, do you have numbers on yours? Yes, if we can just flip back to the presentation, that'd be great. Yeah, I don't know why there's no numbers at the bottom of one. I think it's actually page 16 overall. But yes, that was the slide. There we go. So there is a small change in the roof line, so you can see how it does slope down there. And the new addition will have a new shed roof that goes a little bit higher than that sloping roof line originally does, but overall, in terms of the height of the overall coach house, it will be lower.
Not sure if I'm lighting up.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are.
Oh, yeah, couldn't see it. Couldn't see it. Right. Kerry, was that all right? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions of Councillor Giddings?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Susan, you talked about, in the report, talked about use of traditional materials. And you mentioned now as one of the items. Can you hear me now? You talked about the use of traditional materials and final details of the cladding materials to be submitted, but it's clear that the materials and colors to be used will match the existing home, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Generally, we put that condition in just to make sure that staff can sign off on the fact, that they are using a traditional stucco application, because we don't want EIFS stucco going on to this building, so it will have to match in terms not of the materials and the paint color as well that's being that already exists on the house. The intention is to match, and staff may have a few minor suggestions to make to the property owner just to make sure that the pattern of half timbering is appropriate in scale in regards to the rest of the house as well.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Chair, I'll provide you the recommendation if you'd like it.
Thank you. Any other questions of Sue? No? Okay. Now, we had the owner, Mr. Clive Mail, as a registered delegate. I'm not sure, Madam Secretary, if he is waiting and if he wants to add anything. Mr. Mail, do you wish to add anything to this? We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Okay,
We can hear you now, too.
okay, good, okay.
Oh, good morning. Would you like to add anything to Sue's presentation, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just want to, I believe I've met quite a few in the past, the members here. I've renovated in the past the 43 Dunn Street, and that was quite an extensive renovation. I put about another 100 to 200 years of life back in that building. It was gutted completely on the inside, but the outside was kept very traditional. And the other house that I did was, my son actually did it, but I gave him a lot of advice on it, was 26 Trafalgar. And that was a very extensive renovation again. And we were lucky to save that house. It was just rotting apart, all the woodwork. And anyway, we did a fantastic job on that. I believe that. Everyone else has spoken to me has. So I just want to give everyone confidence that I do love heritage. I love older homes. I'm British and was used to Victorian, and my family had Victorian houses. And I certainly want to keep those for the heritage area. Well, not just Victorian, but any of the heritage area. And you can be confident that I want this house to look perfect. It's my house, I'm living in it. And as well as needing an elevator, I've got a handicap sticker at the moment, and I've got several serious conditions. And I know it's just a matter of timing. I've got a wheelchair, which I've used occasionally when I need to, but I certainly wouldn't be able to get up the stairs in a few years' time. And the only place that this really works, the elevator, is on that corner, because we've got on the top floor, there's a living room, and on the bottom floor, directly beneath it, is another living room. So if by putting the elevator just on the outside, the insides of the elevator, when you open the door in each room, you haven't taken up any space, just the door swinging open. So you're going into a big room, which is so much easier when you're in a wheelchair to get around. So there were suggestions that I put it on the west side of the building. Well, that's not practical at all, because they said, and go into the garage. I think one of them mentioned you could go into the garage. Well, there's cars in the garage, and it's cold in the winter. And if I came down from above, which would mean killing a room, if you're putting a 6x6 plus the door swinging open in a room, and it's got small rooms in this house, then you're losing that room. And as it happens, there's up on that area, there's a bathroom and a small bedroom. Well, the small bedroom couldn't be used at all then, and the bathroom would have to be ripped out. But then, even if we did that, you'd be landing down in the garage, and what do? You ask someone to go down and take the cars out the garage so you can drive through the garage to get back into the house again. And no, it's just not practical at all. So, and as the same goes for any other elevation on it. You wouldn't want it on the front of the house, definitely not. And on the back of the house, you'll be blocking out windows. So, and then you'd be going, yeah, so it's the same thing. You'd be going from one room to another, but instead of it being on the side tucked in, you'd have it right at the back, and it would be obvious, and anyone from Dingle Park looking through could see it. So now my concerns, obviously I had concerns for my neighbor, Mr. Niblock, and he was concerned about noise. Well, with an elevator today, a home elevator, the motor is a hydraulic pump, and that's put right down in the basement. So, and they're not noisy at all. And it's not though you're riding the elevator day and night. So, but I doubt if he'd hear it. And anyway, if he's got his air conditioner on, that's where he's placed his air conditioner, and it echoes between the two houses. I don't think he'd hear the elevator, even if he was listening really carefully. So, okay, and I believe you've got my architect's letter. Someone that was objecting wanted to know why we didn't have an architect's letter. well, I've just explained why the best location, but in fact, in his letter, he states that came to the house some time ago. He actually did the houses on Dunn Street and the one on Trafalgar. So he came to my house, looked around, and said the only place you can put it is where we've applied for. So, right, and the concerns of Mr. Niblock was, one, I said the noise, and then he's talking about water flow. Well, there's plenty of room between our houses just to let the little bit of rain that comes down flow between the houses. I've never seen it flowing there, and I've been out in the rain checking. And he's concerned when I put my foundations in that it would interfere with natural springs in the water, in the ground. Well, when you put in any foundation in, you surround that by clear stone before you backfill. So any water that's coming down within the ground wouldn't be affected at all, because it would, in fact, it would be enhanced the movement of the water by running through clear stone and trying to fight its way through dense, could be clay or whatever ground matter there is there. And he was concerned there were some plans missing that he couldn't see. He couldn't see I think it was the east elevation. Well, they're very clear. I don't know why he couldn't read them, but they're definitely clear here. Okay, I think that's the main things. And if anyone wants to ask me any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mill. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Mill? George, then Ken.
Excellent. Hear me now? Am I on now? Okay, great. Just a question, sir, relating back to the drawings again. The application indicates that the addition is approximately 6 feet by 6 feet. Approximately. We don't have drawings. We don't have any other indication. Presumably, the approximately 6 feet by 6 feet was relied upon by the Committee of Adjustment to give their approval for the side yard setback. But we don't have anything to indicate that it, in fact, is going to be approximately 6 by 6. Is it? What are the actual measurements? 6
by 6.
So it's not...
The internal dimensions that are required by the elevator company is 5 foot by 5 foot. And so we want to build the shaft itself in typical timber fashion, and we want plenty of room for insulation in there and to keep it to code. And it's not bigger than 6 foot by 6 foot at all.
Not bigger than.
No, definitely not.
Well, that's all. We've got your word for that, I guess. That's someone will have to measure it. We don't have the drawings. That was just the question I had, because it's normally we have to have the exact dimensions, and I would think the Committee of Adjustment would as well. But that's my question. Thank you.
I think Susan could add something to that.
I would just note that there were some internal floor drawings that were submitted that had some more dimensions for the elevator that did show quite clearly 6 by 6. But I would also reassure Mr. Gordon that if there's an elevator shaft that shows up on the building permit that's larger than 6 by 6, we will be looking at an additional heritage permit requirement, because it would not be what the committee has seen for approval.
Yeah, this is not unusual for us. Kathy?
And I'd like to add as well that I've just put in an elevator. I've just built a new cottage. We scaled down. My kids are left home. So I just put in a brand new elevator there, and that's 6 foot by 6 foot as well. And I'm using the same company.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mail, thank you for providing us some insight as to the rationale for the elevator shaft and the need for it. I guess my one question would have been, did you look at possibly like a chairlift. I know my mom, who had 2 knee replacements, we use that, and that way it doesn't affect you in terms of the exterior of the house. Did you look into possibly having that versus going for an elevator?
Yes, the thing is, you'd have to keep 2 wheelchairs then. You'd have to have one upstairs, one downstairs. And the other thing is, if you travel at all, and you have to bring your suitcases up and down as well, and things like that. And but we've got a very narrow stairs coming up, a very narrow stairs. And if you put a chairlift there, yes, we've looked at them. In fact, I looked at one in Britain for my mother-in-law several years ago, and we just couldn't work it in. So they're suitable for in some locations. If you've got wide stairs, they're great. They'll work on that, but not on a narrow stairs at all. And then it bends right at the top. You've got a 90-degree bend in it, and they don't work well on that. They take up too much when they swing around the corner.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other questions of Mr. Bell? Okay, thank you, Mr. Bell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Okay, so we're now confined to the board. Any discussion or comment on the application, Councillor Duddick?
There you go. Thank you. Just a question of staff. Listening to the immediate neighbors' concerns regarding drainage, and again, I guess it sort of goes to what you referred to previously, Susan, with the going through the building permit process. Am I not correct in the assumption that any building permit would also have to deal with engineering drawings that affect the drainage on a property, especially given the fact you're dealing with footings?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there will be a number of reviewers on this. There will be our electrical, there will be engineering. Yes, there will be a number of specialists on the building permit review that look at these very technical issues to ensure that what is being constructed on the property is appropriate and safe.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Comment? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to say that it seems that because we don't have access to the plans, we don't know if there would be another location more appropriate for the elevator. But given the presentation that we have, it seems that the location of the elevator and the way it has been rendered, the details appear to be seamless with the existing house. I think that for the adaptive reuse of the house and to continue in its heritage life, I think that it makes sense to support the elevator in order to maintain the usage of the house for an aging population and medical needs, etc. I think from what we see, consideration has been made with the slope of the roof, matching the slope of the dormer behind it, in the materials, in the overall aesthetics, in as much of seamless details as possible. I would suggest, if we can, Susan, and maybe you can answer to this, if you can incorporate, because it seems to be a concern about the 6 feet by 6 feet being exceeded, but at least the width projecting into the yard of 6 feet, if that can somehow be incorporated into the recommendation. And the other thing I would say is that although the details appear to be as seamless as they can be, maybe a little further emphasis on perhaps being a little bit more rigorous with the detailing, with the dimensions of the cladding on the exterior. And I have just a little concern on the south elevation with how the new roof will meet the existing dormer. Those details, I think, need to be refined, and in your capable hands, you'll be able to look at the details. So those would be the elements of concern that I would have. But I think overall, I would be supporting this. I think it's a good thing to do with the heritage home, to have this elevator in that location. I think it doesn't spoil the asset. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Yes, aging in place. Adaptive reuse of the building. Good points. Thank you for that. Any further comments? Councillor Duddick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess through you to staff, I guess I have concerns on page 8 of the agenda on the second paragraph from the bottom. There's reference to the abundant vegetation and the preservation of vegetation. I'm always very, what shall I say, hesitant when I see something like that, that the basis of the assessment on an application references vegetation, because we have no control over that. Somebody could very easily come in, landscape, and change that. So I'm just saying it gives me a bit of concern when I see something. It's different if there's a particular tree or something that sort of lends itself to the home or the streetscaping. But when we reference abundant vegetation, how do you get some assurance that that's going to be maintained?
I think some of the vegetation I saw was a town tree. So.
Mr. Chair, if I may respond, there are no trees to be proposed to be removed. Access for equipment can actually happen around the west elevation of the property because it is narrow and there is a tree pretty much right in front of the kind of eastern corner of this property. And so thankfully there is plenty of access space on the west elevation to come around the rear for equipment. So I would also note that the town forestry staff always circulate tree removal permits to town staff for sign-off. And so generally, it's me who's doing the sign-offs out of our shared responsibilities. I tend to do more of the trees. And so if something does come in for a tree removal, I would certainly be aware of it and would require a heritage permit for the removal of any front street-facing trees. So.
Okay, so some measure of control, but we know vegetation does change over time anyway.
Yes.
But good point, thanks. Okay, any further comments? Councillor Giddings, you had indicated. So we have a motion from Councillor Giddings to approve the staff recommendation. Any further discussion on that motion? Anyone opposed to that motion? Seeing only one, that motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so the next item is item 4.2, and this is a review of a development application at 23 George Street. So this is not a heritage permit. We've been here before. This is where there's got to be a site plan application made, but it comes to heritage so that we can provide input and comments to guide the process, and it might indicate whether or not the project as submitted would meet or not meet our approval at some later date. So we're not approving the heritage application here today. We're just handling comments on the site plan application, and I'm sure Carolyn will explain that to us even more clearly. Off you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a great introduction for this one. So we'll bring up the presentation for 4.2. And again, after my presentation, I'll be making notes on any of the comments that the committee members have on this application. So here is the property, as known as 23 George Street at the northeast corner of George and Front Street with the mansard roof there. We'll go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I forgot. Thank you, Ken. It's habits for 2 years. So here's the location map, just showing again the location of the property. It's one of the original larger blocks, or lots within the block. Again, designated as part of the old Oakville district. The property may contain a portion of an earlier building on the property. It's been added to over the years on that second floor, and the footprint has expanded, and then the building was significantly altered, or probably more likely rebuilt around 1971. So what you have there today is not considered to be contributing. This district plan doesn't say exactly which properties are contributing and which aren't, but this property was not included in the inventory of heritage buildings when the district plan was done. So which does indicate that at the time they weren't considering this property to be a significant heritage property. So in that respect, we do support the removal of the building so that a new house can be constructed, which is what they're proposing. They are proposing at this point to do a new 2-story house with an attached garage. So as the chair mentioned, in terms of process, this is the first view you have of this proposal as part of the site plan approval process. So a site plan application has been submitted, and this is the opportunity for the Heritage Committee and Heritage staff to give our comments on the site plan application as it relates to impact on the heritage value of the Heritage District. And then at a later date, the applicants would need minor variance approval and then come back to the committee for a major heritage permit for the new house. So it just shows some streetscape views. Again, this is the house here. There is an attached garage on the left-hand side, pushed further towards the back. You can see that the grading slopes down here significantly towards this corner. The houses to the north and the east and the west are all higher. And this is a view again from the corner. And you can see the worn doorstep there on the right. This is another view along Front Street. The house to the right is one of the newer houses. It was built several years ago. Again, you can see the grading difference looking at this property here on the corner. And just another view from farther down Front Street showing the worn doorstep across the street. You'll also note the wrought iron fence, and I have another drawing here as well. This is considered to be a heritage attribute of the property, so we would like this to be retained, and the applicants are proposing to retain it. There may have to be some changes made to it in terms of its location. It's partially on town property and partially on the private property, but the goal would be to restore this element as it has been done on other lots where it continues. So here's an aerial showing the existing house, and then in a white dotted line you can see the location or the footprint of the proposed house. So the existing house does not really have a backyard. There's really just the driveway on the north side of the lot going back to the attached garage, and then the rest of the lot is a front or side yard. When we're looking at this property, the frontages, we haven't confirmed the final frontage that the applicants want to use. In this case, they could use either George Street or Front Street because the two frontages are so close in size. And so that still needs to be confirmed through the minor variance and the site plan process. But as far as impact in terms of minor variances, I will go through that. There is one small change depending on which one is considered the frontage. But this gives you an idea of where the house is to be located. The idea is to bring it forward so that it's more in line to the east of the house, which would also provide a rear yard. Again, here is a landscape plan showing the footprint of the house. So the larger rectangle at the bottom is a 2-story portion, and the portion at the top is a 1-story garage and breezeway. Here's a site plan, which is quite difficult to see on here. Maybe go back to this landscape plan. Just in terms of the variances, which I'll go through later, but if the front yard is considered to be George Street, then they do have a minor variance requirement for the setback of the rear of the house, which would be the easterly wall here. There would need to be more separation between that wall and the lot line. If Front Street is considered the frontage, they will need more separation distance between the north wall of the garage and the north property line. And here's the roof plan, and now the elevations. So this is facing George Street, which is showing the front door here on the right, and then a one-car or one-and-a-half-car garage with the breezeway tucked farther back. The applicants are currently proposing white brick as the cladding material, as well as some wood siding on the breezeway, and cedar shingles, I believe, on the roof. Here's a view facing Front Street, so the south elevation. Again, gable roof, shed dormers, large sliding doors on the first floor entering into their yard. This is the easterly view. So again, on the right, you are looking at the back of the garage and the back of the breezeway. And then this would be the east elevation of the two-story portion of the house. And then this is looking from the north. So you have the garage on the right and the rest of the two-story building behind, with a bit of a covered walkway towards rear doors. And we have two renderings, which are also included in your package. Here is the proposed house from the corner. Again, you can see the garage on the left-hand side, and then the sliding doors and the front yard proposed landscaping. And of course, we still would also want to see the fence incorporated as well, which is not shown here. And another view showing the house from Front Street. And one more thing I'd note too is there are two balconies proposed inset on the second floor, if you can see it maybe more clearly here, of this elevation. And then here is a streetscape view showing the house, how it would fit into the rest of the streetscape. So in both renderings of the house, in the middle, you can also see there's a dotted line, a little bit difficult to see here, but there's a red dotted line showing the existing house. So you can see the difference in terms of location and height and massing of what's there currently and what they're proposing. So on the top, you can see the mansard roof structure, which is sort of in the middle of what they're proposing now. On the bottom, you can again see that two-story mansard roof structure, which is about the same sort of width of cross, but lower in height. And then again, these are the existing houses on either side, depending which way you're looking from George or Front Street. So in terms of minor variances, they are proposing currently a lot coverage of 27.95%, and only 25% is permitted in this area. They also need a minor variance for floor area to lot area ratio. So only 30% is permitted, whereas they are proposing 33.16. And then the rear yard setback, those two places I noted that would require a rear yard setback, they're very similar. One is 3 meters and one is 3.04 meters. In both cases, 3.5 meters will be required. So whether the frontage is taken from Front Street or George Street, they're off by about 0.5 meters. And there is one final one, which is the east wall. There is a window well being proposed, and it encroaches into the yard by 1.1 meters, and it should be only encroaching by 0.6 meters. So I've included the district plan guidelines here. They're also in your package. I don't think I need to go through all of them unless anyone wants me to. I will give a bit more detail too in terms of the block analysis, but these are the general guidelines in terms of the design and materials that would be accepted and supported for a new house in the Heritage District. In terms of the block analysis, it does give some description of the area. It speaks about having a walkway system along the lake shore, of course, which just doesn't really impact this property necessarily. But one thing I would note is the last one, which is shown on this image, but it's difficult to read. It speaks to the deep setbacks of the houses, giving an emphasis to the presence of the lake. I will note that these houses have also changed on this block. There are new houses in that area since the district plan was created. So that existing condition that was there in 1979, 1980 has changed as well. And that's about it to highlight there. So again, the staff recommendation today is just that the application be received. We're happy to take any comments you have on the application as you see it, and that those will be incorporated into staff's comments for the site plan application process. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, super. Yes, I'm lit up. At some stage, they're going to have to decide where the side yard is and where the front yard is. I understand because the frontages are equal. you can make a choice. But the way it looks right now from George, you've got an entrance, you've got a door. It could be a side door, but it could be a front door. But when you look at it from Front Street, and you've got the two gables, and you've got patio sliding doors in the middle. So I guess if it were to come back to Heritage with the Front Street being the front entrance, Heritage would be looking for something more like a front door than simply a walkout, a sliding door. So if it comes back in that format, they would have to have decided where the front door is actually going to be and make that accordingly. So that's just a quick off the top from me. And I was disturbed that, there's no windows at all in that east elevation. It's just a huge blank wall. Variances at this stage in the game, I mean, surely you can live within 23 or 22 or 21, and you can live within at this stage, but that can be dealt with later. And so that's kind of just a couple of quick thoughts from me, maybe to get people thinking about it. But remember, this part of the process is to get ideas like that. And some of them will go into that hopper, and some of them will be contradictory, and we know that, and we've seen that happen. It should be this or it should be. But that's okay, because it's all input, and it's all good input, and it will be used, and some of those inconsistencies, perhaps, will be resolved during the planning process before it comes back here as a heritage application. So, okay, who wants to get started? Dave.
We're on. Thank you, Chair Bucknell. Further to your comment about whether it's south-facing or east-west facing, I have the same concern with the potential use of balconies, whether they face one direction or the other, as well as the windows. It's good to hear that they plan on maintaining the fence. Could that be included as a condition as opposed to planning to keep it, realizing that it may have to be adjusted as a result of property lines?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Giddings. So it will be, I'm trying to think, I think it is shown actually in the site plan, and we would require it to be included in the landscape plan. So showing it existing. And I think you're right, and maybe Mr. Hicks can speak to this as well in terms of how it would be dealt with in terms of relocating it. But I think from my perspective, in terms of approvals, we would want to see it incorporated into the landscape plans and site plans through the site plan process so that we know it's going to be there. And again, it would appear on those drawings for the heritage permit as well.
All right, thank you. And I appreciated the detail on the use of white brick. I wasn't sure whether it was going to be stained brick or white brick. Any discussion in terms of different cladding being possible that may be more suitable to the area?
So we haven't gotten discussion of materials yet. Again, just through the site plan process, we can get more detail through the heritage permit process, but it's still good to bring it up now. From what I've understood, that's what they're proposing right now. I think it might be a good question for Mr. Hicks today to see if there's any other options, because we haven't gotten to those details back and forth yet, just because we're just reviewing the site plan straight up right now. But I think it's a good time to bring in some of those details that will come back through the heritage permit process as well.
All right, and further to Councillor Duddick's comment about 262 King, the grading will be covered off in terms of water flow and so on.
Yes, correct.
The setback, the district plan talks about the setback on the lot, and this shows that the front yard would be quite reduced. So that is a concern. And in terms of lot coverage, do we know what the current house has? I'm just wondering in terms of massing on the property.
Again, perhaps Mr. Hicks has the number, but if we bring up the presentation again and go back to the aerial view, I'm not sure which, yeah, that's correct. So it's just a few slides down towards the beginning. I could do it, sorry. Here we go. So in terms of footprint, this maybe gives it an idea. It's not a number, but you can see the existing house does have that long linear section similar to the existing, the proposed house, but it is more narrow, so it is smaller. And then there is, of course, the footprint of the garage as well. So,
And I appreciate that that brings it more in line with the home to the east, but it's still the loss of that front yard or side yard, depending on which way the house is going to be. The window well, I take it that's for light, the extension of the window well
into
to
the
allow.
basement, correct, yeah.
Okay. And that's it for now, thanks.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Just a wee thought on the fence, though. I mean, I know that the town goes through periodic land grabs when it widens the roads allowance, and that may have been what's happened here, but it's kind of where it is right now, and I just would throw in, if there's some possibility of some kind of easement arrangement, like leave it where it is. If you're going to, instead of ripping it up and knocking down the stone corners and all that, just leave it where it is and enter into whatever legal easements you might need to, responsibility to maintain, being with the homeowner and not with the town. I think that might be helpful, picking up on what was said earlier. Any other? George?
There we go. Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on Councillor Gidding's comments, if you look at the pictures of the photo of the current George Street, it's a two-story home, white stucco, but the second story is mansard roof, dark. If you look at what's proposed, it's all white, proposed, but it's really a three-story height, if you will. If you compare the drawings, the current building is full 2 stories. This is 2 stories plus a roof that really equates to a 3rd story in height and massing. And the plan, really, the overall plan for the district was that you shouldn't really, in a nutshell, you shouldn't really increase the massing height in the area to change that configuration of what's there already. I mean, that was the reason for the designation initially. As a throwaway, you can see what's happened to 1st and 2nd Streets. We don't want that to happen again. The plan clearly talks about height, massing, height, and scale, and the surroundings. And it also talks, as was mentioned in the opening comment, about the availability of land in front of the house and by the lake. The plan really talks, the plan doesn't suggest or intimate that all the houses should follow a certain distance from the road or from the street. They want the randomness to give, and again, that was the reason for the designation of the district, as pointed out in the block-by-block analysis. So I'd be dead against the white. It's really white on white. That would stick out like a white elephant. I shouldn't say that, but that's what it seems to me. If you come off the street, there it is, 3 stories, basically, in height and mass. So that's dealing with that aspect. I think I'll see what other comments come up, and I'll see if I have any other men. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Jerry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really happy to have the opportunity that you brought this forward to the committee at this stage for input. And I have to say that the way this house has been designed will significantly change the character of the area and the experience of promenade down George Street to the lake and east and west along Front Street. I look at, on page 32, the old Oakville HCD plan, and it includes the guidelines it includes, and I don't see how the proposal meets any of the criteria listed here. And I won't go point by point because it's on page 32 and 33. I wanted to say as well that while the new house design appears a lovely, well-proportioned work, there are elements of the whole design that cause concern for the context. And of course, it's a difficult situation because you have to balance the rights of the owners against the context, the heritage designation, and the community experience. So it's a tough balancing act, I'll admit that. To follow up on what Mr. Chair said, there is a confusion of where the main entry is located on the external presentation of the house, whether it is as presently exists on George Street or whether it will be on Front Street. The architectural rendition presents entry hierarchies with a strong formality and symmetry, suggesting the main entrance is on Front Street, with the secondary entrance as a service entry, mudroom entry located between the garage, the one-story garage, and the two-story main portion of the house. The design is a bold, symmetrical, and a very tall massing for the area. Its character is a contemporary interpretation in the detail manifestation of otherwise traditional details and forms. Its character is not derived in any way from the existing spatial arrangements of massing or the relationship of solid and void as experienced from the street today in its heritage preservation intent. It does not have an intimacy of scale, which is very much the character of this district, and does not blend in the existing context, which has come to be known as the Oakville vernacular. It is not sympathetic to the block, nor the neighborhood, and disrupts the existing experience of the walkway system along the length of the old Oakville lakeshore area, eliminating the deep setback and interplay of the existing house along Front Street, and the play of solid and void as experienced promenading along north, south, and east, west. The east facade is imposing, the one on Front Street, and wants to be seen in its prominence, almost more appropriately wanting to face the lake directly as a lake entrance. And then it would make sense that the George Street entrance would be the urban entrance into the house, addressing the town, while the Front Street entrance would have addressed the lake. That would have made sense. Again, the effect on the surrounding area is devastating. It takes the breath away from the Warren doorstep, and that is an asset as identified on our page 50 in the block analysis, and which is the key building in this whole area. So the balance of massing needs work, and I'm glad to be able to give comment at this stage. I think there needs to be, it would be beneficial to have a few more conceptual design massing studies of the area. This particular corner lot doesn't present itself in the traditional suburban context way of a house on the street with a backyard. This is an experience of the lake, so the front garden is open and ample and airy to give back to the community and the houses and the context around it. So it is not, it's a traditional suburban front yard, backyard setback situation, and it's existed this way, and that is why the area is under heritage designation. So I'm happy to give comment and really appreciative that it's being brought forward in this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Robert.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with those comments as well. I think it misses the mark, in my opinion, in terms of the look and feel of heritage. I really do feel that. I wonder even how vigorous the discussions are on just staying within the coverage guidelines as well. And so I'm not comfortable with that.
Thank you, Bob. George?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also note that the proposal is for a garage to be situated in front of the house. Our guides usually, if you look at the plan, page it is, I can't have the right page. Either one of the designs, here we are, 37, showing the garage that in front of the house, whether it's the front or side entrance, doesn't really matter, but the house, the garage should be tucked back in, as we've always talked about tucking back in, behind the main building, as the takeaway. This looks more like a 1950s design concept of garage out in front and then all the new housing going on to the north here. That just, it just strikes me as odd, because really it's, one of the main requirements in the plan, and I'm quoting from the plan, is that ensure that the proposal will be sympathetic to the district's character. Well, it's completely unsympathetic to the character, and it's not compatible in any way with the rest of the district. It's just, there's so many items here that, that being one, the other being the color and the roof, and it's just the massing closer to the street, as pointed out by Jerry. Really, she's put it much better than I could, but the garage one really stuck out in there. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Kathy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wholeheartedly agree with the previous two speakers. Jerry's comments really nailed it. I think it's important for the applicant and their representative to get some indication, and I don't know whether we do some sort of a straw poll, but if I were the applicant, I may say, oh, that's only two people who felt that way compared to the whole committee. If other people feel the same way as Rob and myself, maybe we need to say wholeheartedly agree so they get a sense of how strongly the committee feels on the application. And I agree with Jerry. I'm very appreciative that the applicant and their representative has provided us an opportunity before they go down that rabbit hole and then get strong opposition. It's a much more productive process having it this way.
Thank you, Kathy. Carrie?
Thank you. So in that same vein, nobody ever can say it as eloquently and detailed and architecturally as Jerry can. My main two concerns would be, again, the loss of the setback. That's one of the lovely things about that street, because it's directly opposite, or more or less directly opposite, of the Warren doorstep. I think it would really take away from the streetscape. And to Chair Bucknell's comments regarding the front door, there are other houses on that street that side onto Front Street, but this one currently does front onto Front Street, and I would find it a bit odd that it doesn't any longer. I think it would take away a little bit from the streetscape. Agree on the comments on the fences, and I was just wondering if staff can comment in the letter from Jane Hockrick and Jamie McCrae. They noted, or was their thoughts, that in other applications it was said to maintain the fence, and apparently it wasn't. I'm not, does staff have any comments towards that?
Sorry, the comments about the other application, or?
They just made the comment that this application says to maintain the fence, but in other applications it said the same thing and they didn't end up being maintained. Do we have any, and a little bit to Councillor Gidding's comments, can we more emphatically impose a requirement? And I love Drew's idea about keeping it and doing easements instead of having to move it, because things will get damaged. But I was just curious on the citizens' comment saying, well, we said that before, and they ended up disappearing.
I think if it comes back as a heritage permit application, then that wall and the fence, that issue would be dealt with. and we'd be part of that approval process.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, it would also be, we have a unique situation here where we have site plan as well as the heritage permit, and through site plan, we look at things like where the driveway goes, where the setbacks, fencing, that sort of thing. So we can require it to be showing up in drawings again for both. And, if they are to remove a heritage attribute, what we consider to be a heritage attribute, we could go through our regular process of, going to the courts through fines, et cetera, of course, which we would hope not to have to do. But in terms of approvals, we have 2 approval processes where we can have the fence included. And again, we will take that point back and see what can be done in terms of retaining the house, or the fence rather, in its existing location, and deal with that through agreements as well.
So we've all had a chance to comment. It's on the comments now, and Mr. Hicks has been waiting patiently, and I'm sure listening and writing down a lot of things. So I think it's appropriate to let him give us his input at this stage, and then we can go on from there. Mr. Hicks, are you on?
Good morning, committee. Can you hear me?
Yes. So, Mr. Hicks, you've heard some comments from members of the committee on the process. Perhaps you would like to give us your input and share your ideas at this point.
I will, definitely, and I apologize for my voice. I'm actually with COVID right now, so I'm at home, but I wanted to join and listen in. So I appreciate the comments. I'm not going to go through every one of them in detail, but as was said at the beginning, we initiated a site plan process because it was our way of get comments like this back. So I appreciate hearing the comments. I don't agree with all of them, but that will be something that we go through as we reevaluate where we stand. But right now we don't have any site plan comments back, and we couldn't get any site plan technical comments of any kind back until we at least had some comments back from the Heritage Committee. So this will enable us to look at comments in general from everybody. And it's obvious from your own perspective that you'd like to see changes, substantive changes to it. I won't say that we're not prepared to make those changes. We do see George as the frontage on the lot. You can select either one as the frontage, but the original house was the George Street frontage. The address is is frontage on George Street as well. We'd like to keep the frontage on George Street. While I appreciate some of the comments with respect to maintaining the large front street setback, I have an obligation to my clients, and certainly from an urban design perspective too, to provide a rear garden for a client. So we have to move the house forward. And in fact, urban design did give us comments back and said that if you planned on using any of that front street frontage as your recreation area, they wouldn't be in support of it at all. So. But that being said, we are going to find a way that's hopefully solves some of your concerns or all of your concerns, but we do have to provide a proper rear amenity space for any homeowner that doesn't have to sit in front of and be totally visible to everyone on the street. The fence is an easy issue. I've dealt with this on Chelsea Hall before. It does encroach on the property. It's going to take the town and committees like this to say to Public Works to accept that encroachment. We're happy to. It's the town that has to accept the encroachment, not us, because it's off of our property, but that's easy to deal with. It's getting Public Works to accept that. So we have no desire to remove it. We have no desire to take it down and rebuild it. We'd rather see it stay right where it is. So. Grading is going to be raised on the property. It's sort of the dumping zone for all the properties around there. There's a pond in the front yard right now, so we do have to lift the house to some extent. Things like the window wells, those are variances that can easily be dealt with. I've heard your comments with respect to coverage. We'll look at things like that. Materials, we had to put down something in terms of a first initial submission, but we have looked at alternatives in terms of using siding on it, using shingle on it, using brick on it, using stone on it. So those pieces are open for discussion, and I think that we'll be able to work our way through that. But I think in general we do, as I say, we do see the entrance being on George Street. The garage is something that we can push back. Again, I'm trying to maintain an appropriate development area for, or recreation area for anyone who lives in this property. So we'll find some balance in that, but I think we're looking forward to seeing all the other comments that are coming back from the other departments too. And then we've heard what you've had to say today. We will then come back and evaluate what our next steps are and how many changes we can make to accomplish what you're suggesting. I do believe it does meet some of the guidelines. Actually, there was a comment, excuse me. There was a comment made with respect to heights. We're actually well under the allowable heights on this site, so substantially under the allowable height on the site. But I know that we still have to look at impacts on the existing streetscape and the existing flow and block character, et cetera. So I've heard your comments very clearly. We will go back and look at it once we've got the rest of the comments from site plan, and then we can look at it as a whole and come back with what we think a final and appropriate scheme is. I'm sure we won't agree on everything. I know that. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to hear the comments today. So,
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Yes, it is I think it's a good process. I'm glad you're seeing it in a positive light. You're getting feedback.
Yep.
And it's giving you something else to work with. I don't know if anyone wants to ask Mr. Hicks any direct questions at this time. Kathy, Councillor Duddick?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Hicks, for attending and being receptive to hearing the comments of the committee. Did you mention the fact that you can, given the existing property, it's, you referenced the dumping ground, I guess, for the neighboring property, so you have to raise the height of the property? And I guess my concern is, we've already heard and acknowledged at this committee that we have concerns with the additional height that is being proposed. I understand what you're saying, if it's in keeping with the two-story height limit, but that will raise it even more in terms of the overwhelming presence. If what we've got now is going to be higher, and then higher yet with the additional height, I guess that's the biggest concern I have. It's already overpowering, and then when my ears heard you saying you're going to raise the grade, I'm thinking it's going to be even more of an issue in terms of appearance. So I just offer that.
Thank you, Councillor Duddick. You're right. I mean, that's one of the reasons we want comments back from engineering. It is where all the water in the area drains right now. We are going to have a stormwater management requirement. I think you'll find when I say raising, and I'm not raising the entire property, it's really what's considered that frontage on Front Street itself. I don't think it actually raises the house height. It's the ground height that has to be brought up to properly drain the site. And that's something that's totally controlled by engineering, and we're not going to be able to leave it the way it is. So it's like to say we could keep it as low as possible, but engineering's never going to approve it. So, and our client simply won't accept everyone's property dumping their water onto his property. So I think we can do it in a sensitive way, but it's not as if I'm picking up the whole front yard with the house and raising it. It's really just that front yard piece. That's the low point on the property. It's actually higher at the back. So
Yes, it's a beautiful area with such variable topography, but we know dealing with so many homeowners there that some of them have got 3 or 4 sump pumps and generators as backup and so on, because there's a lot of water issues down. And you're low to the lake. The water table you're sitting right on top of it.
That's right. And I think this one ponds basically in the spring. So
I think it does.
Yep.
As you say, engineering would require you to deal with that.
Yep.
Any further comments, Jerry? Did you want to add something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hicks, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that there was a department that mentioned that they would not approve the Front Street area as a recreational area on the property. Which department would that be?
Urban design will fight me to the end of day. So I try and put a barbecue or something else out there, so.
So urban design would not support keeping the house in the existing footprint that it is presently right now? Is that what they're saying to you?
No, they are going to want to see some private amenity space, not in the front yard.
Because as it sits right now, all of the amenity space is on the front street side, so.
That's right.
Urban design is considering changing the existing scenario? Or not
Well, that's-
approving an existing non-conforming use of the site?
Well, it's not really existing non-conforming because we're proposing a new house, and urban design will say when you propose the new house, fix the problem, so.
Ah.
So
okay.
that's
So
what
it's
we're
an
waiting
urban
for
design.
the comments back from them. But again, anyone who's going to purchase that property is going to want some private amenity space. They're not going to put a pool in the front yard, so. There's already a pool in the spring.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks.
Yeah, so many moving parts in this. Okay.
There are.
any-
That's why the site plan process is, we need to get the rest of the comments before I can even comment specifically on some of the suggestions, so.
Good. So any further comments for Mr. Hicks? Oh, thank you, Mr. Hicks, for joining us. George, did you
No,
want to add
not to
something?
Mr. Hicks, but just as a matter of
Well,
information.
Okay, I'll do that. So
Yeah.
we'll just let Mr. Hicks go. You
Yes.
you can sign off now, Mr. Hicks, and I
Thank
hope
you
get-
very much. I'll go back to bed.
I hope you get through your COVID quickly.
Take care.
Yes, George.
Well, it was partially that and partially not, but when talking about water, having lived in the property to the north of that, immediate north for 40 years, we helped to, no, we helped to help the dumping because there's an underground stream that runs down underneath there. And before we bought the property, there was an outdoor pump on the property. And the well is still there. It was capped over by the people we bought the house from. So there's an underground stream. We had 2 sump pumps going there all year long. I know that the Kennons, who were the people at the property to the south, had theirs going too. But no, there wasn't ponding. We took most of it before it got to the Kennons. Just as an aside.
Good. Okay, I think from Carolyn taking notes and stuff, I mean, you've had a lot from us. Are there any other comments that you want to add, Jerry? You want to add? Good.
I was also just going to note, Mr. Chair, that we do work with urban design, of course, to coordinate our comments together. So when the comments come from site plan, hopefully there's not going to be, completely contradictory comments coming from each of us, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that, Carolyn. I was concerned to hear that urban design would not support an existing massing, to support a new massing following an existing massing pattern. So I would say that there's something, what can be done to coordinate and to give the client some flexibility so that they can at least attempt or be assisted in the attempt of maintaining some of that solid void experience on the Front Street side. Because they can't look at this site as just a typical, bylaws are bylaws, but we have an existing contextual situation here that needs a unique approach and some creative thinking.
Correct.
Yeah,
It's not a
thank you.
typical lot, and so often urban design's comments are trying to improve a situation, so just because there's something there today doesn't mean that it's great for the neighborhood, so why not take an opportunity to improve it, just like we do with Heritage. If there's a 1970s house with a giant garage sticking out front, we wouldn't support a new house with the same type of layout because we want to improve the situation. But in this case, because it is a heritage district, obviously urban design will work with the heritage planners and we'll have a coordinated effort to provide comments that meet all of our guidelines.
Yeah, because this is not a situation where you will be improving it. This is a good situation as it exists, and it would be good to keep it in a good standing as it exists. There's no improvement to be made with the solid void massing on it right now, in my opinion. Thanks.
Okay, good, thanks, Jerry. So any other comments from anyone? So I think you've got a good bucket load of stuff, and I think the sense, to pick up on what you were saying, Councillor Dunn, I think there's a general sense that this wasn't met with an overwhelming round of applause, but it's not to say that things can't be bettered, and I think the response from the architect was good. Okay, so the motion would be simply that we receive. So, Councillor Dunning, would you? Oh, so the motion is that we receive that and with the appropriate comments have been noted. Okay? So any other discussion, questions, comments? Anyone opposed to that motion? No. So the report is received. Did you want to say something? No. Okay. Okay, good. I should maybe have asked you before we called the question. But anyway, so let's get on to some nice, good news. 4.3, which is the Bronte Harbour and Bluffs Cultural Heritage Landscape Conservation Plan. And Sue's going to walk us through that. And I know she will help me particularly and others to understand what red dotted lines and yellow dotted lines mean and what's the difference. So, okay, Sue, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll get the presentation up on the screen so we can go through those dots together. But as the chair has noted, this is very much a good news report to finally bring forward the conservation plan for the cultural heritage landscape that the town has recognized at the Bronte Harbour and Bluffs. And so this is our infamous red line, yellow line situation. And honestly, we haven't dealt with this in a couple of years, really, so I certainly don't blame people for not remembering the intricacies of what is happening with these various sets of lines. When we originally studied the Bronte Harbour and Bluffs as a cultural heritage landscape, we studied a larger area, and then it's really common for us to narrow down a smaller boundary in the end. In this case, the area that was studied is actually the cultural heritage landscape, and that is the area in the yellow dotted lines, which is a large portion of land. However, there is a section of land that includes both Bronte Beach and part of the outer harbor areas, as well as a small square around the Cenotaph Memorial that are owned by the provincial and federal governments. And the town does not have the ability to designate those lands while it is under the ownership of other levels of government. And so we have designated the portions of land within the red boundary as the cultural heritage landscape. However, we've left the yellow boundary line there just to show people what the extent of the actual cultural heritage landscape is in the case that the town is able to purchase or pick up these lands at a future date, which is a possibility. And so at that point, it would be very easy for the town to amend its existing heritage designation bylaw to include all of the lands within the yellow boundary to say, now we have the intact cultural heritage landscape. So hopefully that helps. Right now, just to be very clear, the land that is designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act is within the red boundary, and it does except the War Memorial Cenotaph on Lakeshore Road West, because it's not town-owned land, or it's federally or provincially owned land. So that's what is in the designation bylaw, and that is what we are looking at in the conservation plan that's before you today. But in the future, should those lands become available for the town to purchase, or should they come under private ownership, we have our justification to move forward with that designation immediately. So this is a project that's been underway for quite a few years. The original research and assessment report came forward in October of 2018. It was one of those original 7 high priority properties areas that the town was looking at. Because it was town-owned, it was one of the later ones that we dealt with, or largely town-owned, rather. The notice of intention to designate for the area was issued in February of 2020. We all know what happened in March of 2020, which involved the town, with the state of emergency that was enacted, the town then had to reissue designation notices later that fall. But either way, the designation was appealed by the single private property owner within the area. There are 2 property owners. There's the town and the private property owner. The town worked with that property owner to come to a minutes of settlement at the Conservation Review Board, and those are now in place. It involved a minor adjustment of the origin points of view lines 9 and 10 that are shown in the designation bylaw. And once we had that in place, we could move forward with the conservation plan. And so we had a really good draft kind of waiting in the background that we needed to update with all of the information from the minutes of settlement, as well as ongoing consultation with stakeholders such as the Bronte Historical Society, the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, and of course this is also being circulated to that private property owner as well, to bring forward the conservation plan that's before you today. And so this is just another map showing some of the different types of landscape features that are within the cultural heritage landscape designated boundary, that red line, including the bluffs, the channel lands, the low-lying harbor area. And in the conservation plan, we have the typical items that you have seen in numerous other conservation plans for cultural heritage landscapes, where we have descriptions of alterations that are either exempt from heritage permit approval or require a delegated staff approval or require full committee and council heritage approval. As always, maintenance and operations are exempt from heritage review. These are not management plans for businesses or for the conservation areas. And so those exempt items are included in the category A in that conservation plan. Activities that don't affect the heritage attributes essentially are exempt from heritage review. And so the conservation plan also has updated the heritage permit process due to the changes made to the Ontario Heritage Act last year. So there are some updates made to like the appeal processes and so on to make sure that we're meeting all of the new legislated requirements about how to manage change to this area while conserving the cultural heritage value in the future. This is just the view line map. I just call your attention to 9 and 10. Those are the view lines at the very top of the screen, and the origin points were shifted slightly from the intersection of Marine Drive just a little bit to the south as part of that minutes of settlement. It still maintains the views themselves, looking one into the harbor, that's view 9, and then out to the lake, that's view number 10. And so today we're here to seek your input on the draft conservation plan. Any suggestions that you have, we'll try to get turned around very quickly so that we can get it to Planning and Development Council for August the 8th. But if you have general satisfaction with the plan or just very minor amendments such as typos, both the chair and I have a couple of minor typos. I think we've got 3 or 4 of them that will be made for the P&D version. If you're generally satisfied, we recommend that you endorse and recommend the conservation plan to council for approval. And so that is the staff recommendation before you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have or receive any additional feedback.
Yeah, I'm on. Thank you, Sue. That was really good. Now I'm sure you've all read it in great detail. Well, we've kind of seen a lot of this process before. It's been going on for a while. Has anyone got any comments or feedback to give? Jerry? And then, was it you, Jerry? Did you want? Yeah, Jerry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Susan, I just wanted to ask a question outside the box. Do we have any indication of a future plan for this area? Is the town considering anything in terms of future development? Should the Bronte Simple Beach be purchased by the municipality? Is there a broad scope?
Mr. Chair, I'm not able to answer that. I mean, all I can say is that our parks and open spaces staff are one of the reviewing departments on this plan, and so they're fully aware of the extent of the cultural heritage landscape should the town pick up that additional parcel that's not currently part of the designated area. I don't know if they have any intentions. I think it's all really a little bit preemptive just because there's really no timeline, as far as I know, from the federal government to actually proceed with the sales of those lands at this time. We just want to be really prepared.
Okay. And I raise that only because I believe that this little simple beach is the only one left in the area that is not overly developed, and it's still kind of nice and contextual and simple and a little hideaway.
It's a lovely spot.
Yeah. Thank you.
And the feds have that beach right now. But I guess it's one of those things, there's no burning platform, the beach is still there, Oakville people use it, nobody's planning to do anything. I guess it would only come up if there was erosion or something that you had to deal with, and then the feds would be very quick to give it to the town. Along with a blank check with no signature on it. And yeah, okay, thanks, Jerry. Any other comments on it? Because it's good. This is good news. It's always nice. I'm glad we keep these ones to the end of an agenda. Yes. Okay. So if there's no other comments, then if somebody would give me a motion to say that we would enthusiastically endorse the report. George, you do that? Good, super, thank you. So George has moved that motion. Any further discussion? Anyone opposed to the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, Sue. Well done. I think there actually is an information item, and it was one that we'd kind of asked to have pretty regularly. Like, what's the update on the revision to the conservation district in the old Oakville plan? And we've got Sue here, so I would ask her to just give us a short report on that, and perhaps between you and the secretary, just make sure that pops up on our agenda as a regular update, as an information item, simply because we want to be really aware of what's going on with the process as it goes on.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe this was mentioned at the last Heritage Oakville meeting. It was requested that staff be provided to or provide a short verbal update as part of the information items, just to let the Heritage Committee know what's going on with the update to the old Oakville Heritage Conservation District. I'm pleased to do that. I can confirm that we have retained consultants for the project. They are being led by Archaeological Research Associates, Inc., in partnership with Dillon Consulting and GD Valley Architect. Interesting to note is that Archaeological Research Associates are the ones who just actually helped us with this conservation plan, so we're very confident we're in good hands with them. We've had a number of meetings between the consultants and staff, and we've also had a first kickoff meeting with consultants, staff, and members of the Oakville Lakeside Residents Association, which is wonderful, and we're currently looking at finalizing our draft public engagement strategy and setting dates for site visits in August. And so that's where we are right now. We will endeavor to try to keep updates posted to the town website, as well as sharing information with the Residents Association and, of course, our ward councillors as it becomes available. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Super, thank you, Sue. So if I could have a motion to receive that information item, I think Carrie would like to give me that motion. Good, super. I just knew it. So Kerry, having made the motion, I'm sure no one is opposed to it? No, thank you very much. So we've received the information items. The date and time of our next meeting is August the 23rd. Back here again, assuming we don't get into wave 10 or 12 or something and we shut down again. Shouldn't say that, I know. So that's it. So a motion to adjourn. I think Bob wanted to make that motion. Again, no one's against that. So the motion has been carried. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you for the gift of your time, everybody. It's always a pleasure. Thank you.